Howdy, howdy, everybody. You're listening to Office Hours FM, episode number 58. Today, I've got Bob Dunn back in the house. Hey, Bob, how you doing?
Good. How you doing, Carrie?
All right. I don't know why I had to say it like, how you doing? It just sort of, you're
How
not
you
even,
doing? Yeah.
you're on the complete other coast, but it came out sort of a Goomba-ish. Well, for all the folks just tuning in, thank you for joining us today. You can ask questions by tagging them with hashtag OfficeFM on Twitter or using at OfficeHoursFM. Tweet to that on Twitter. If you're using the watching this via the Google Hangout, there's a little Q&A. You can also send your questions in there, or you can just wave your arm wildly wherever you're sitting. And I have a new plugin that enables me to view that and know what your location is. Wouldn't that be freaky? Today is sponsored by Managed WP, who is the kind of one-stop shop dashboard for managing all of your WordPress sites. So if you're managing more than one site, go check them out, and you can even do a free trial. managedwp.com, and that is a huge time saver. Our other sponsor today, we have ShayBox back. You may you may know Shay from the Foodie Pro theme. This one's so big, I got to take a sip of water to get ready for it, Bob. Shay has unleashed, she's unleashed what's called the Design Biz Crash Course. And it's a 5-day online course, but you can actually take it at your own pace if you don't want to go 5 consecutive days. But she lays out what's worked for her and what has not worked for her in her freelance design business. I've been through it myself. Awesome. Shay's got some great insights and is very honest. And she's offering $50 off for you listeners. If you want to check that out and get the $50 off, go to officehours.fm/podcast/58, because this is episode 58. And with that, let's get rolling to the goodies. So Bob, welcome back. You were on episode 7, which makes it almost 1 year ago that you were on this podcast.
Wow, that long ago, huh? Yeah, I've aged.
I know.
1 year older, and
your beard wasn't gray the last time you were on.
Oh, really? Yeah, it's you know, as I get more into this WordPress stuff, you know, the gray starts coming out more. So.
Well, for folks who haven't had the chance to meet you, give us a quick rundown who you are and what you do.
Okay, I have a training and coaching business. So I primarily focus on training groups like businesses and nonprofits and even corporate clients in WordPress. And then I also do one-on-one training. I've done that online for several years and just recently starting to do that in person as well. So it's kind of around those two areas. And then I also offer workshops. I've done a lot of those in the past, kind of took a break, and now I'm back into doing local workshops, quite a few of them, and have some new stuff going on with them. So basically, in a nutshell, trainer and coach. WordPress all the time.
Well, and you clearly have a passion for teaching others. I don't think you would survive very long in that segment without a love for teaching.
Yeah.
I know you, before you entered the WordPress world, you had your own agency, and you've done a lot of design work back from you know, when design actually happened on a piece of paper and went to the printing press all those ages ago. And what was what made you say, I'm turning this off, I'm turning off this business, and I think I'm going to make a leap and hang out my shingle doing WordPress stuff? I mean, was that kind of a scary leap, or did you feel pretty confident about going into business?
Yeah, you know, it was probably because I started freelance, I think, in the late 80s. God, this is really going back. And then I started our business in '92. It was a marketing and graphic design business. And in the early '90s, I was starting to do some web stuff, trying to understand it. And I basically couldn't stand doing it. It was HTML. I can't even remember I'm trying to remember the software I was using, but I was putting up these horrible looking brochure sites, I look back at those, and I always knew I had to get into that more. So when I started looking at WordPress around 2007, that's when I thought, man, this is pretty cool. So I dove into that more and more. By 2008, I decided, okay, I'm going to start offering this for a service, because it boiled down to, hey, now I can give something to clients that they can manage themselves, because I just didn't really want to have to be always there for them, changing content and stuff. So shortly after I started that, it was probably in 2009 or so, I'd done print forever, logos, that whole schmear of stuff. And it was just becoming less and less important for people. I mean, there's print materials out there, but it was dying. And with logo design, everything was starting to get around 2000 into crowdsourcing. And it was hard to compete. When you used to, charge a couple thousand for a logo, now everybody's getting them for $99. And I looked at some of the stuff, and I thought, a few people came to me and said, hey, I got this logo for $99. I'm like, well, that's really not too bad for $99. And I at that point, I thought, man, this print thing, and I was getting kind of burnt out on it. I was thinking, man, the WordPress was starting to pick up a little bit more. And there was one day I just said, I'm dropping all my print clients and focusing totally online. And then when the economy kind of got weird in, I don't know what that was, 2001, 2002, the WordPress stuff was picking up. And I just said, screw it all. I'm just going to do WordPress. I'm just going to design WordPress sites. That's all I'm going to do. I kind of it was kind of scary, because I had a few good print jobs still here and there. I just told those people, this is the last time I'm doing this. And fortunately, I kind of entered it around that time, was a prime time to enter it, because it really took off in the direction I had hoped. So it was cool.
Nice. Well, quite a journey, and your journey is ongoing, because you've hung out in that training space, but your offerings, there's been sort of a metamorphosis over the time, even the time that I've known you. You've got a podcast rocking now. I want to talk a little bit about that later, and then your training is taking a little bit of a new direction. So you're wanting to, and correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but basically teach workshops and be able to offer them for free to the community. So right there in your neck of the woods, and then find corporate sponsorship, if you will, to underwrite the cost of that.
Right. It's something I've been toying with. I think I've been testing with it a lot, because prior to about a year and a half ago, I must have done like 150 workshops in this area, and I was doing free and paid workshops, and I really enjoyed doing that. And then during that time, I was still doing design. So it was kind of, I designed sites. The design part of things, I liked, but I think just having done design for so long, I was getting a little tired of it. And I kept wanting to build up the training. So I added the group training. I've done some corporate training, which I'm trying to build up on one side, but the workshops, I went online for about a year and a half. There was a point where I thought, man, I just don't know if I want to do these local workshops anymore. So I got my pajamas and sat at the computer for a year and a half and thought, the globe is my customers. I'm online now and everything, even though I'd been before. And after about a year and a half of that, I started thinking, man, I really miss the workshops, because there was just something about connecting with people in person. So in the last fall, I decided to start them again. And the thing with, this in the community, it's very tough. Everybody expects something for free. I mean, we battle with this in every aspect of WordPress, and, things are going, I think, in a better direction and stuff. But the The workshops are especially tough unless you're doing really comprehensive multi-day workshops. And I just noticed that people still were kind of looking for that free workshop, no matter what I did. And sometimes you spend so much time trying to fill registrations and selling it that you don't have as much time really putting in the energy into the actual workshop and, finding the best way to get that just out there, but the content, all this stuff. And I started thinking, and I actually approached GoDaddy on the initial concept of this. And Mendel, I'd gotten to know him, and I'd kind of, turned my corner on GoDaddy. I was, one of those GoDaddy whatever in the past. But the last year, I saw a lot of things happening with them, and I talked to Mendel, and I thought, man, they're really trying. They're going in the right direction. And so I approached him and said, how would you like to sponsor 4 workshops? And we talked about it a bit, and I explained how I would do this, and they went for it. And so those have been really great. And when I was thinking of free workshops, there's that, anybody can put out a free workshop, or anybody can just say, oh, we're going to do it. And then there's the attrition. You kind of got to overbook because, you're going to have certain no-shows. But what I realized is, how can I do these free workshops? Because there's this sector of people that just are kind of starting out, and they, their money, I almost think I'd rather have them investing their money in good themes and plugins, and even, if they need some help customizing, instead of learning the basics and getting started. So that's where the sponsorship thing came in. And I kind of expanded on that. And, I won't quite get into detail unless you want me to right now, but it wasn't just, here's a workshop sponsored. I'm really focusing on how to not just make these people customers long-term, but advocates of the product. So some of the workshops I'm offering are going to be actually custom workshops around certain products. So if you have a very best-selling premium plugin out there, I'll do a 3-hour workshop just on your plugin, how people can use it, how people can get the most out of it. And so you kind of get a customized workshop around your product or your service. And that has just started. I just launched it Tuesday. So, I got some work to do.
Well, thanks for getting that. So when you do these custom workshops, will you make them available after the fact via your website, or is this sort of if you didn't make it,
that's
not in the area, too bad?
Yeah, I think what I'm going to do is, what I'm actually going to do is create like a small course. And that small course is I'm not going to get into videos or anything, but kind of a text screenshot course that basically walks through all the main highlights of that workshop, make it available to the attendees I'm kind of throwing right around 30 days. Maybe I'll make it available to them for 60 days. That way I can continue to give the sponsor, a bit of more play for their money. Plus, I'll offer those courses at a minimal cost for people that didn't attend the workshop. So I can at least use that kind of ongoing. And because a lot of these people, when they come to my workshops, by the end, they're just cross-eyed and, they're about ready to drop on the floor. And they say, Bob, wow, you told us so much stuff, so that will be a good follow-up, because I try to follow up with resources and stuff, but this will at least give them something to go back and revisit to kind of remember those little pieces they forgot.
Okay, so I want to follow up with you on the
Okay.
the actual workshops and how those unfold. But first, let's talk a bit about the sponsorship aspect, because I think it's a really interesting way of funding. Clearly, I do it here on the podcast, and I know a lot of podcasts do that. But it's an interesting way of finding funds so that you can offer something for free to an audience. But and you touched on this, the rub is, how do you make it so that you're offering value to the people who are sponsoring you, but you're not being really annoying to your audience by just basically being a massive commercial. So when you approached GoDaddy, did you sort of set the terms of engagement, if you will, or were they like, okay, when we do sponsorships, these are the requirements, da 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 da?
Mhm. Yeah, I basically said this is what you're going to get for the money. So I laid out, all the and they get their logo on my workshop. Any advertising, I constantly talk about the upcoming, thanking them and stuff. And for that particular need, the audience, we picked the workshops that would work for their audience, which is kind of people that are on the edge of thinking of starting a WordPress site. So they're in the point where, yeah, they may be thinking about also purchasing hosting. And what I do is I bring, in that particular case, I bring in a part of my workshop that talks about hosting. So I give a general overview of what kind of hosting is out there, shared, managed, all this stuff like that. And then I basically give GoDaddy a 15-minute commercial talking about a specific service of theirs, but I do it in a sense of value to the people. I don't say, oh, you can do this and you can go over and get this extra add-on and stuff. It's like, if you have this hosting, for example, you could easily access the FTP information. It's just easy to find. So I explain to them why they may need that. Carrie may call you and say, what's your FTP? And you'll go, duh. But in this particular case, because of the way the hosting works and the features they give you, it's easy to find that information. So you'll be able to just pop in, check your dashboard, or whatever they call it back there, and find that information, send it off to Carrie. So I try to build it in as more of a benefit and educate them why they would use these services, backup points, all this stuff, why that's important in the overall scheme, and not just always be saying, buy this, buy this, buy this.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. You're making it a win all the way around. And speaking of FTP, I cannot tell you how many times I've had to go help clients chase down their FTP. Usually they just end up sending me their hosting login and say, go get it.
Right.
They don't even know what they're looking for.
Exactly.
Which, that's a lot to ask for of a non-technical person.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it's impossible to find it sometimes in some of these cPanels,
So speaking of money, a question from the vendor, and he wants to know what made you switch from the paid membership model to the free model.
Okay. I did membership. I've done 3 membership sites, and I just didn't, I 2 things I think. One is I think the membership arena, even though it's very promoted and there's a lot of, I think if you find the right, niche, you can get in there and do something, but it's becoming a bit saturated and you have to be really careful jumping into membership. It's membership, building your site is like 1/10 of doing a membership site. It's easy to build a membership site and building that community. There's a lot to doing a membership site prior to launch, during launch, and then of course continuing to do it. Myself, I just found that I was out there basically teaching what a lot of other video sites did. There's Sean at WP 101. He's had that for a while. He does great stuff. And I just got to a point where I thought, okay, what I need to bring my personalization back into it. And a lot of that has to do with in-person versus online. So that was a big thing. And then, you got to realize, especially depending what you're going to do, some of this membership stuff, you got to be constantly providing content for these people to want to stick around. And, if you're doing it in a technological setting of like WordPress, you talk to Sean anytime. How many times do you update those videos? And how many times do you have to update those tutorials? Because 2 or 3 things change, 4 times a year. So for me, it was just, I just felt like it was, first of all, WordPress was saturated online, the learning WordPress, and that I just realized I wasn't cut out for a membership site. It was just not the direction. the concept is wonderful. The getting in and work, a lot of realization comes to, you come face to face with, like, no, this isn't just, revenue constantly coming in. It's constant work. It's a lot of work, and I'm willing to work, but it just wasn't my thing.
It's frightening. I've actually thought of doing, the membership aspect, and offering some unique content just for members and so forth. And it scared the crap out of me. I was like, that's too much responsibility to know that I'm taking somebody's money each month. And, then there's this pressure to come up with stuff. It's easier to leave it free and then, be creative about monetizing in other ways.
Yeah.
So, by the way, I'm going to try to mute myself if it happens again, but I'm really close to an Air Force base, and I get F-35s and F-16s fly. I'm in their flight path. And whenever the 35s fly over, my dogs bay. I don't know. There is some frequency that's just in that particular plane. And it's, yeah. So if you hear wild barking, that's what's happening.
Oh, no problem. We're not far from a military base either. And when they're out there doing their practice, our house shakes because of the bombing and stuff. So it's interesting. So I can relate.
Oh yeah. I try to, if I complain about it, my husband just says, that's the sound of freedom. And
yeah. That's
okay.
when we figure, hey, they got to do their thing, Do
what you got to do.
Right.
We have a really great question from Jackie, and just to frame this, Jackie is a freelance developer offering her services, and I know that a lot of people who listen to the show fall into that category of either offering design or development or consulting, something around WordPress services. In the WordPress space, I'm probably just framing this question too much. I should just get out and ask the question. She says, how do DIY users value developer and design services when WordPress is free and themes are either free or as low as $50?
No.
This is like the 99 cent question. You can get a $100 logo. Why pay $5,000 for you to go do deep in-depth brand research and come up with a logo?
Yeah. And it's interesting because I think of, when I started in design, it was desktop publishing. And that was kind of the issue. That it's, years ago, it was the same thing. Desktop publishing. Suddenly everybody was doing desktop publishing, and they could do brochures for 10% of the price of what these graphic designers would do. I think it's, I don't think there's any pat answer. What I find with my clients is that a lot of them come to me thinking they want to be the do-it-yourselfer. And unfortunately, it takes a bit of education. Here's a perfect example. Somebody came to a beginning workshop to me, a beginning workshop I did about a week ago. And it was going through all the basics. It was a 5-hour workshop going through all the basics of WordPress. And right away at the beginning, she started freaking out. Isn't this a beginner course? This is way over my head. I said, no. I said, we're starting at ground zero here. This is what you're going to have to deal with. And she frowned a lot during the entire course or during the workshop and stuff. And then I got into themes and started talking about choosing your theme. And then she really went wacko. She just she was holding her head, and I thought she was just going to collapse or something. But
it's a very dramatic reaction.
Yeah. At a point, towards the end, she said, you know what? She says, I'm so glad that I came to this workshop because I just realized that I need somebody else to do this. And she said, I can, I understand now I can manage it, but me doing what I thought I could do, because I don't sugarcoat things in my workshops. I go through and say, this is, everything that's you've got to learn and you've got to figure out, and you don't want to mess up at this point. And she suddenly realized that. So there is still people that there's people that are going to always do. They're going to struggle. They're going to do it themselves. There's no way we can convince them to do otherwise. But I just find from a lot of people that come to me, their expectations, and I can't tell you how many times somebody has sat down with me. People will hire me to kind of help them decide what direction to go. And they'll just go through all this stuff and I'll explain everything and say, you can get this done. You can do this yourself, this. And a lot of times it's like the final thing is your best bet is hiring somebody. Find a good designer and developer. I said, don't go out there and find the cheapest, because likely you're going to be coming back to me or coming back to somebody else. So it's kind of that education process. Unfortunately, to do that for every person is sometimes seems almost impossible, but in a way it's being very honest upfront with people. And I don't beat around the bush and say, oh, I can do this. And then I go and Google it and figure out how to do it and come back and try to do it for them. I'll just flat out say, nope, I can't do this. You need to have a developer do this if you really want it done right. So that's how I get people to make that decision. And sometimes they just need to almost experience it themselves and hear what it really takes. And that it isn't just, oh yeah, you can put up a site, this WordPress is easy, things enough to drive me nuts. And, I get the leftovers from that, the people that their expectations have not been met.
The leftovers. Bob gets the leftovers. That's the quote of the show, right?
Yeah, that's my new tagline.
Well, that user is never going to go away. I mean, that's just a fact. There's always going to be a DIY person who's curious and wants to try to get in there and do it, and that is okay. I think as freelancers, we get frustrated with that crowd because they undervalue our service. But on the other hand, they're getting exactly what they need or what they want without paying for it in some cases. So, there's legitimacy at both ends of the market, I guess. But I was listening to a podcast yesterday. It was either the Freelancer Show or the Business of Freelancing with Brennan Dunn. But his guest was talking about if you're having to sell the value of your services, you're selling to the wrong crowd. Go to people who already understand the value of your services, and then serve them. So it's pushing a rock up a hill to try and convince that $50 person that it's worth it to spend a few $1,000s with you.
Yeah.
Okay, planes are coming over. Okay, I got another question for you.
Okay.
Matt, our friends over at the Matt Report podcast.
Oh, Matt. Oh, God.
He wants to know, have you thought of any other unique avenues to provide value to sponsors? And just as an example, or you don't even need an example. You go.
No, I'm still, kind of in that workspace or work area or whatever you want. Because I've just launched this, so I've really put out some stuff, and there's some different things. In fact, Matt, he should know this. We did talk a bit about it beforehand because I kind of got some feedback from him, and there's other ways. I think there's other creative ways of doing it. It could even be that you're required. The thing is that I can say, okay, let's say it's a plugin workshop. And the sponsor and I say, okay, I'm going to get, X amount of people there. I'm going to require everybody, of course, to buy that plugin. So they've at least got that sales generated. The gray area that I've had to explain to a few people I've already talked to about the sponsoring and get it is that what I'm trying to do is not just build a sale right at that particular moment for that person, but I'm also trying to build credibility for that vendor to everybody there. That yes, I buy it now, it may be later, but also now that I know what it can do, I'm in there learning it. Now I'm going to start hopefully telling other people about it. I need this. So it's kind of a long tail type return for them in a lot of ways. But yeah, I'm still thinking, that's going to be a part that I'm going to be constantly trying to think of new ways. And because I know that, just from the questions I've had already that, yeah, that ROI, I need to provide something, but one guy did actually ask me and he said, I understand also I'm kind of paying a bit for your reputation, because people do have a tendency to trust you. And I said, that is part of it, but those are such soft gray areas that sometimes you can't wrap monetary return on that. So it's going to, I think it's going to be, there's challenges to it, but also I think there's real potential. So I just got to kind of work this out. And then it's not all flat. I'll be working with each sponsor, and if we can think of other creative ways to do things, especially depending on their product or whatever, it's not going to be, this is set in stone. No, let's figure out another way to do this, or the best way to get you a return on your investment.
So, well, I love that. And you're right that it is sort of a long tail approach, but by way of it, I don't think that some of the value that you offer your sponsors doesn't necessarily have to do with you getting them out in front of your audience. And for instance, on that, my very first job out of college that wasn't a freelance gig was designing banner ads for a radio website. 468 by 60. I will never ever forget that dimension. Banner ads, that's horrible. But anyways, when Matt sponsored this show a while back with his conductor plugin, he, of course, I appreciated his sponsorship, but it was a new product and he didn't have any affiliate banners. So I whipped up a couple of banners for him. And I don't know, Matt, you can tweet if that was awful and a completely valueless thing. But to me, that was something that was not difficult for me to do that was hopefully helpful to them. And, I don't know. It's interesting. I know we weren't even gonna,
that makes sense. Yeah.
Somehow we've devolved into a show about sponsorship strategies, which that could be a topic all of its own. We had a question from Kelly. Hello, Kelly. First time caller, long time listener. I don't know if she's a long time listener, but she says, how do you think that Weebly, Wix, etc., will impact WordPress for that DIY beginner crowd? And I guess and I'll tack onto that question. By the time they get to you, have they already ruled out Weebly and Wix, or are they still just, they don't even know the difference and they're just kind of pinballing around?
Yeah, they pretty much have decided on WordPress. Sometimes I will have to talk them into it. And I've actually had a couple people, very minimal, say, oh, I'm going back to whatever, somebody mentioned Wix or something like that. It just sounds like a lot easier approach to me. And I just go, okay, cool, go for it. Because I can sit there and argue, platform, and I'll always give them, what I feel is the benefits. But, most people do know they want to go with WordPress. They're just not sure if they want to do it themselves or have somebody help them. And, as far as how they impact, I don't know. That's my guess is probably as good as yours or anybody else's. There's people that I think there's enough out there. There's enough people that are wanting to get online, that those options are out there. And I think so much as word of mouth with WordPress is somebody will maybe be thinking about Weebly or Wix, but then somebody comes along that they hear talking about WordPress and they're telling them, oh, I did this cool thing like this, and they realize that's something they can't do on that platform at all, or there's limitations. So they'll think, no, I think I like this WordPress thing. And I think it'll have some impact, but only time will tell. It's so hard. People, I can't, sometimes trying to get into the minds of some of these people I talk to, it's like, I just at a point say, whatever works for you, do it. Okay.
Oh, well, having been in the WordPress space and even in the technical space before WordPress for so long, and this applies to both of us and probably a lot of the listeners, it's really hard to roll back the memory tape and think of a time where this was all overwhelmingly new. And God bless you, Bob. You must be a very patient person, because I think I get worn out with those beginners in a hurry.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
Hey,
it's patience. It's huge.
maybe you can get a liquor company to sponsor your show, and they'll sponsor it in form of sending you liquor to deal with the all those questions from new people. Ease your pain a little bit.
Yeah, it's in the works. Yeah, I got that in the works. So yeah.
Well, let's talk about your podcast a little bit. So, podcasting. Everybody's getting into podcasting, present party or present self included. So, how'd you make the decision to take your show on the road?
Yeah, I feel bad talking about it because I've missed 2 weeks again. I've still got to get into a consistency here, and I keep telling myself, yes, it will happen. In fact, somebody was asking me about sponsoring my podcast, and I said, well, that'll be great as soon as I can actually guarantee you that'll be every week. So let me work on that. But I thought of podcasting back about I bet 4 years ago, 5 years ago, because there was kind of this podcasting was big, and then it kind of mellowed out for a while again, and then just the last maybe couple of years it's been going on the uprise again. I remember I went to a workshop, a couple of friends I know that were actually doing podcasting they've been doing it for years and years, and I was all gun-ho, and I thought, man, this is really cool. And I got back and started thinking about it all, and I thought, man, that's a lot of work. And it just, it just never transpired. It was, I just put it off. I thought, man, I just can't fit it in. It doesn't really work for me now. So then when I started this one, and I guess I started it probably last fall, I was just trying to think of, I want to throw podcasting into the mix, and I want it to be, I want it to be a little bit different and shorter. So mine are like, 5-minute to 15-minute podcasts. And what I wanted to do was, one of the things that I always have had people tell me over and over in the last years when I'm teaching them is they always send me a thing, and it would always kind of encapsulate, Bob, everybody always tells me how to do everything, but in your tutorials, you also tell me why I should be doing this. And they said, that's what we enjoy about it, because you're not just saying, step 8, 1, 2, 3, do it, now move on. You're saying why I'm doing this and what the benefits of doing this are. So that was where I thought, well, I'll go ahead and do something around why should I do why should I do, or why does this happen, or why is this happening, rather than how to. And I had I basically had the equipment, and I just needed to carve in the time and do everything. And I didn't want to do a interview podcast, because there's, you have yours, and there's enough of those out there that are good quality podcasts that I thought, I just don't want to dive into that. So I want to kind of create my own little unique thing. And I think we lost Carrie there for a minute.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was trying to unmute myself and turned off my video instead, because finger dexterity. Yeah, I'm still working on that.
So anyway, so I need to get back into it regularly, but I do enjoy doing it, and a lot of the things I take out of come from, I see some conversation on Twitter happening or something, and I'll just think, okay, this is podcast material, and I'll whip out a script for it and put it aside for the next week or whatever. But yeah, definitely just something I just wanted, like I said, add to the mix.
It's fun. It's a whole lot of fun. And a lot of things I've been reading lately, or maybe I'm just now getting the point, and it's been in front of me all along. But the idea of repurposing content, and over, I've been producing regular content for 3 or 4 years now, and there's a lot of it there. And there's a lot of it there that could be, maybe repackaged and served up in a different format. So, for example, eventually taking one of these podcasts and somehow, working a blog post out of it, or taking a collection of blog posts and making an ebook out of it. Have you been able to repurpose any of, because you've got a ton, from videos to ebooks, you got the whole 9 yards. Have you been able to reuse that in any way?
Oh yeah, it's amazing how much I'll take, between my newsletter that I send out and the blog, and just everything spurs something else. So I'm kind of reusing it, but I'm updating it in one respect or another. So I can be writing a blog post on how to do something. And right away I'm starting to think, okay, why should I be doing this? Okay, put that aside for the podcast, because that'll be perfect. Then I can always in the podcast say, da 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 da. Now, do you want to know how to do this? Refer them back to an old post that I did that will actually walk them through the steps. So I may be saying, why should you put, social media icons and stuff on your blog? This is a reason why. Now, do you want to know maybe to use and how to install them? Check out this blog post. So yeah, it's constantly finding, linking stuff, bringing stuff back, and reviving it. And I just did that with my list of stock photo resources.
Okay.
It was quite a long list, and I decided to drop it started out as a paid and a premium, but the more I added to it, the more free resources I found. And I thought, well, I'm just going to go ahead and convert this into all free resources. So I dropped off the paid ones on the list and started tweeting it out again. And I got a bunch of retweets and people going to it, and got a bunch of, a little bit of spike on that old post, because it was just refixing it a little bit and reusing it. So yeah, I'm big on that, especially, look at that content, figure out what you can, because you got so much on there, you got to take advantage of it somehow.
I was talking to Rebecca Gill the other day, and I don't even know what it was about, but she mentioned Google Analytics and looking at who your referrers are, and what content they're referring people to. And so just as an experiment today, which true confessions, I have a really high bounce rate on my site. People pop in organically to read an article, and then they're out of there. And so I went and looked, and I had a really high referral rate from something I never even heard of, and went and trailed around, and I found the post that they were referring to. And it was a post I wrote, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago. And again, this is an experiment, and I just did it today, so the jury's still out. But I went and updated that post, and instead of just sort of dead ending it, I gave some options to continue browse, so to lead people to like resources on the site. That's a little bit of a tangent, but just maybe a tip out there for bloggers if you're looking to you want to kind of maximize all that content you've already made an effort to go out there and produce.
Yeah, exactly.
So switching gears a little bit, because you're very much in that beginner space. Do you have thoughts on the overall WordPress picture of more that mid to enterprise level use?
I get people coming to me, and then the other side of wanting to up my training for business and corporate training type of stuff. That's where that is. In fact, I was just talking to Matt, our friend, and he was talking about how, the enterprise, how more WordPress sites are showing up in that. And thus those people will need some kind of, consulting, guidance, whatever. So I am dabbling in that sense. And I do get a lot of people that come to me at all levels, even though it's kind of, they see I'm a beginner, but there's a lot of people that are at a point where they're going to, I hate to say the next level, because I hate that term, but that's what they're doing. They've had a site and they're, wanting to change it over to WordPress or whatever. And sometimes I've done consulting for that level and actually kind of given them ideas of how to approach a developer or designer, because they do want to go to somebody like that, but they don't really feel like they can articulate their needs or what they want to be a little bit more knowledgeable when they go in. So I give them just enough information where they don't go in and just say, oh, I know all this, but they can go in and feel like they can ask intelligent questions to a designer developer. So a lot of those clients are the bigger clients, and they have a lot of needs. And I just basically go down their needs list and say, yep, this is, the approach you'll want to take on this, or this is realistic, or this is, overall, you're probably looking at a site, somebody came to me with all these needs. I want to build this site, and just this long. What do you think? And I said, to be honest, I'm not a developer, never been, but I would say you're probably minimum $20,000 for this site. Just looking at all this, and she really started paring it down quite quickly. I was like, oh, I don't have the budget for that. Maybe I should start out a little bit slower. And I said, yeah, really. So sometimes, like I said, people, get it in their heads, and I'm sure everybody, that yourself included out there, can relate to that, all these things, but really they all look pretty simple, and you should be able to just whip them all together. And sometimes giving them realistic input there, that gets them a little bit more at a level where now they can approach somebody and their expectations are going to be, distorted on either end and stuff. So I don't know if that really answered your question, or if I just got on a tangent there, but definitely looking at.
It was good conversation. So I run or co-run a local meetup. And whenever there are new WordPress users there, the question I get all the time is, what plugins do I need? What plugins do I use? How would you answer that question, especially if you're looking at maybe free plugins, or how do you help them vet?
Yeah, basically I first I tell them there isn't any really one. I always, and people hate this when I say this, but there isn't really, I don't think there is one must-have plugin, because there's just too many variables. So I go through and try to figure out everything that they need as far as extended functionality that the plugin would be. Is it going to be gravity forms, or do they really need gravity forms? So I get their, I go through their needs, and I base the plugins on that. Of course, there'll always be certain ones that I'll recommend, for, SEO or something like that. But I need to, I explain to them why, okay, I think you need this because of this, and you're going to have to do this by installing this. We just don't install this and it magically happens. So it's really on a need by need basis from site to site, because I'll just be honest with people. I can't give you, everybody tells me I need a Kismet. Well, do you have a blog? No. Are you using anything that, your comments are? No, nothing at all. And I'm like, okay, well, now let me explain why maybe you don't need to install it in your particular situation. So unfortunately, I don't have a list of these are the must-have plugins, or the plugins even that I recommend most. Some of them, they just go crazy. They'll want to put everything in there, and they'll, well, anybody knows that. That. You're laughing. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of a more the merrier situation when it comes to plugins, right?
Yeah, right. It's just little toys and stuff. And the same with themes, they're kind of at that same point with themes, trying to figure out which theme to use. And I've actually gone through 2-3 hours of coaching, or I don't know what you'd call it, consulting with people just to find the right theme. So there's a lot of, to me, it's always, don't just put all this crap in or throw this theme on there just to get started. Do it kind of right in the first place, because you're going to, especially since you're doing it yourself, you're going to save a lot of time.
Do you use, made me think of getting on the phone with people and answering questions, but do you use Clarity or anything like that to, for kind of one-off conversations that folks want to have with you?
Yeah, actually, and I don't know, I think you might have followed I've done my contact page so many different ways. I've made it very, very, radical, and I did Clarity for a while. Nothing really happened, so I kind of took it off my site, and I think I had an account, but I just didn't use it. I just added it again. So if somebody goes to my contact page and I have all these, I really, here's all the choices, contact me for a workshop or, training or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Then if they actually click the button that says, I have just a question or two about WordPress. If they click on that, then suddenly I use that nice little conditional logic and a little paragraph shows up that says, oh, good. Well, you can call me on Clarity now. It was kind of I haven't had anybody use it. I just recently did it, but it was kind of a way for me to work around nicely to tell people that quit sending me your emails and asking me, 2 or 3 WordPress questions, because I get that a lot. And I actually put up a paywall one time where if anybody wanted to ask me any question, they had to pay $25. And I actually had a few people doing that. But then even then, sometimes expectations were up because I said, pay me $25. I'll give you a $25 answer. And maybe they weren't always that happy with my $25 answer. So yeah, so Clarity is there. I just haven't, most people that I deal with, well, probably they'll just freak out with Clarity because they will be concerned about the time. How long of an answer is this going to take? And they'll be calculating right away.
But you know what? It's a good thing for people to be aware of that. I've same thing. I get a lot of questions coming in through my contact form. I could answer questions all day long and never get to work. So I've modified, just like you, I've gone through many iterations of my contact form, but the way I have it right now, I've actually got a little checkbox that says, I acknowledge that I might not receive a response to this. Yeah. So if they're contacting me on a project, there's, same thing, using conditional logic, they're going through that funnel. If they say, hey, I'm just wanting to say hello, which is basically anybody can get in there, then they have to check the box acknowledging that. And that's really cut down on a lot of superfluous questions. And then the people that do come through are very respectful about it. They're like, hey, I understand you may not have time, but want to run this by you. And I tell you what, when people approach you like that, it makes you a lot more willing to want to give up a $25 answer for free.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just imposing on
and I get tons of people wanting me to try out their plugin or themes. And, even if I put on my forum, if you're wanting to do this, if I don't know you, I'm sorry, I may get around to it by my own power to try it out sometime. So that's when I get a ton of just everybody wants me to.
Bob,
would you
that's
write a
the
post
price
about
you
my
pay for
plugin?
being famous. Well, I want you to be thinking of advice for our listeners. If you could give one piece of advice on working with when those DIY clients come up, how maybe we could communicate with them in a way that's not insulting, but also communicates maybe we're not the right fit for somebody that's doesn't have a big budget. So think about that. And while you're thinking, wanted to remind everybody listening that you can subscribe to get reminders to the show at officehours.fm/subscribe. And I send that out on Thursday mornings before the podcast. And I also I've started including just a little helpful blurb or link or something I've read through the week that might be helpful. So hopefully you're getting a little extra value from those just beyond the reminder. And also seriously big thanks to Manage WP, who has sponsored every single show this year so far. Huge supporter of what I'm doing here, and also just big supporters of the WordPress community in general. So check them out, managewp.com. And then Shaybox over there, and I don't know why I just wanted to go bark, 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 bark like a chicken. I'm sorry, Shay, I've just ruined it. That was people probably made fun of you in elementary school, and now I've brought up terrible memories. Wow, I feel like a failure. So the Design Biz Crash Course if you are new to freelancing, get over there and pick that up, because I think just really practical tips on how to work from home, how to go out and generate some new business, good stuff. And you can save $50 on that by using the link on my site over at officehours.fm/podcast/58. So with that, Bob, what advice would you give?
Okay, two things. One is remember what it was like. You know, I think that's the biggest thing is anybody that comes to you as a beginner and whatever point they are, remember if you can reach back and remember how the first time when you opened up WordPress, if you can have that empathy and relate to what they're going through, that will show through, and that means a lot to those people. That'll really boost their confidence in you. And secondly, I think this seems like common sense, but be honest. I can't tell you how many times somebody has approached me and I've just been flat out saying, no, I'm not the person for you. You need to do this, whatever. I give them some advice and they always come back to me almost every time and say, the one thing I would appreciate was your honesty. You were right up front with me. You didn't beat around the bush. And I think what happens is you got to remember these people. A lot of these people have been screwed over some way or another, unfortunately. And I get a lot of those people. They've had at least one really bad experience. And I can't always say it was their fault or the developer designer's fault. I don't go there. But if you can kind of at least, and have a little patience with them, but also, be upfront with them. Don't beat around the bush. Don't waste your time. Don't waste their time. If you feel it's a red flag going off, you don't say, you suck, go away. You basically, I don't think I'm the person for this, and if you can always have, of course you don't want to send somebody that you think is a bomb ready to go off to somebody else, but if you can at least say, here's some suggestions, do this. This might be the best route for you to go at this point. I think that goes a long way because they're going to remember that. And I have people coming back to me months, sometimes years later. And, I appreciate what you said back then. Now I'm ready to do this. And I think you can help me. So
that's fantastic.
More feely good stuff.
So even if you're shutting a door saying, I'm not the right fit, you're at least not a dead end. You're pointing them in some other directions. That's a great tip and huge value there. Well, Bob, I very much appreciate your time being on the show today. Always a pleasure to have you. And maybe we should make this like the annual Bob Dunn appearance. Or on
why don't we do that? So every year, pretty soon you can have the gray hair, showing the transition after 3 or 4 years.
You'll eventually be bald. My hair will be gray.
Yeah,
and
really.
we'll have the transition here. That would be so strange.
No,
Bob,
I love it.
What's that?
Oh, I was just gonna say I love being on this show, even though it's just once a year.
Well, thank you. Where can people follow up with you and find you on the web and learn more? Oop, did I lose you?
Yeah, I think you did for a minute. Now you're back. Okay.
Okay.
Now, actually, you asked people where they can find me. bobwp.com. So I actually have a slide on all my workshops and presentations that says Google Bob WP. That's the easiest way to find me. You'll find me everywhere and anywhere.
Sweet. And don't get that confused with WP Bob. That's somebody entirely other that I accidentally landed on one time. Bob WP. Cool. Well, Bob Dunn, thank you so very much. Have a wonderful afternoon. And to everyone who took the time to tune in live, you rock and you're awesome. Thank you for listening. And for those of you who are catching us after the fact on iTunes or SoundCloud or however it is that you listen in, we appreciate you listening too. And I'll see everybody next Thursday. Bye.